Welcome back to our channel. Today we explore a stunning moment. A servant girl, alone in the desert, called by name by the God who sees. Why would God step into her wilderness? What does El Roi mean when you feel invisible or abandoned? Stay to the end. The name she speaks and the promise over her son may change how you see your own desert. Let's begin. Alone in the blazing wilderness, her breath came in shallow gasps. The sun blazed above like fire from heaven. The wind carried no comfort, and the silence screamed louder than words. Her skin was cracked from the heat. Her steps slow and uneven. Each one felt like it might be the last. She wrapped her arms around her swollen belly, not in hope, but in desperation. She had nothing left, no family, no freedom, no future. Just the barren desert before her and the crushing weight of betrayal behind her. Have you ever felt like that? Like you've reached the end of your strength? Like every door has closed, every voice has turned away, and even heaven seems silent? Have you ever been so unseen that even your pain feels invisible? This is not just a story from the ancient past. This is the story of a woman whose suffering echoes into every age. A woman who had no power, no privilege, and no say. A woman who was used, then blamed. Loved for what she could provide, but never for who she was. This is the story of Hagar, the woman who was seen by God before she would speak with angels, before she would name a well that still stands today, before she would carry a child who would father a nation. Hagar was simply a servant, an Egyptian girl, taken from her homeland, placed in a foreign house where her name was spoken only when needed. Her body did not belong to her. Her life was not her own. She lived in the household of Abram and Sarai, a couple chosen by God. God had promised Abram a legacy, a people too numerous to count. "Look up at the stars," God said to him. "Count them if you can, so shall your offspring be." And yet, year after year, Sarai's arms remained empty. The promise seemed stalled. The silence from heaven grew heavier. And then, out of that silence, a decision was made. Not by Hagar, by Sarai. Sarai turned to her husband and said, "The Lord has kept me from bearing children. Go, sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can build a family through her." It was not a plea, it was a plan. A decision rooted in despair and frustration. Hagar had no say, no consent, no voice. She was given like livestock, not as a wife, not as a partner, but as a vessel, an instrument of Sarai's desperation. And so Hagar was handed over to bear a child, to carry a legacy, to fulfill a promise that was never meant to be hers. But life has a way of shifting, doesn't it? The lowly can rise. The invisible can become undeniable. Hagar became pregnant, and suddenly everything changed. The girl who had once been treated as furniture now carried the seed of destiny. And something inside her, perhaps hope, perhaps pain, perhaps pride, began to grow alongside the child in her womb. She walked differently now, held her head higher. For the first time, she was more than just the servant. She was the mother of the heir, the one who had succeeded where Sarai had failed. And the house grew tense. The Bible says that when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Perhaps it was subtle, a lingering look, a sharper tone, a quiet defiance. But Sarai noticed. The very woman who had orchestrated the plan now burned with bitterness. She turned to Abram, her voice quivering with fury. "May the wrong done to me be on you. I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me." Abram, caught in the storm of two women's anguish, simply said, "She is your servant. Do with her as you see fit." And with that, Hagar's suffering began. Day after day, Sarai made her life unbearable. Her words sliced like blades. Her commands became cruel. No matter how tired Hagar was, it was never enough. No matter how hard she worked, it was never good enough. The home that once imprisoned her now became a battlefield. Until one day, She couldn't take it anymore. She fled into the wilderness, pregnant, exhausted, alone. No plan, no map, just the instinct to escape, to run, to get as far as she could from the torment and the weight of carrying someone else's broken dreams. But the wilderness is a cruel place. The sun does not care about your sorrow. The heat does not ease up for the weak. And slowly, her strength faded, her mouth dry, her limbs heavy. She fell beside a spring, perhaps to rest, perhaps to die. But then, a voice. "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" She blinked, startled. There was no one there, and yet, someone was. She turned, and there stood a figure by the water, a presence wrapped in light and mystery, the angel of the Lord. He knew her name, not servant, not girl, but Hagar. She had been seen, and she was being asked, not condemned. Then came the instruction: return to your mistress and submit to her. Return to the pain, to the rejection, but the voice didn't stop there. "I will increase your descendants so much, they will be too numerous to count." Then the promise grew deeper. "You are carrying a son. You shall name him Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your misery." Ishmael, God hears. Suddenly, the air shifted. Her lungs filled. Her heart slowed. For the first time, she felt something she had never known. She was seen. She was heard. She was known. She whispered the words through tears, not knowing they would echo for thousands of years. "You are El Roi, the God who sees me." And she gave that spring a name, Beer Lahai Roi, the well of the living one who sees me, a place in the wilderness that became sacred, not because of its water, but because of the God who met her there. Hagar stood, not with all the answers, but with enough strength to keep walking. She returned, not as a runaway, but as a woman marked by God. Time passed, and the day came when a child was born. Abram named him Ishmael. God hears. The boy's cries echoed in the tent as Abram held his son for the first time. Was this the heir of the promise? Was this the beginning of God's plan? Or was it just the beginning of another story entirely? Only time would tell. But for now, Hagar, a woman the world tried to erase, was no longer a shadow. She had met the God who sees, and that changed everything. Time moved like the desert wind, slow at first, then sudden. Ishmael grew beneath the harsh sun and star-filled sky, shaped not by palaces or privilege, but by struggle. He was strong, wild, sharp-eyed. The desert taught him to survive. And through it all, Hagar watched him with fierce, protective love. She had given birth not just to a son, but to a living answer, a child named God Hears. The world might still see her as a servant, as an outsider, but she knew the truth. Heaven had spoken to her in the wilderness. She was not invisible. She was not forgotten. And yet, far away from the desert, something stirred. God had not forgotten his original promise either. Abraham no longer just. Abram stood again before the Lord. Now an old man, his skin wrinkled from time and sun, his strength faded from the long wait. And God said, "Your name shall no longer be Abram, but Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. And as for Sarai, she shall be called Sarah, and I will bless her." Abraham's breath caught in his throat. He laughed not with disbelief, but wonder. Will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at 90? Then his heart turned to Ishmael, his firstborn, the one who had filled the empty space of the promise. He cried out to God, "If only Ishmael might live under your blessing." But the answer came clear and unshakable. "Yes, I will bless Ishmael. He will become a great nation. But my covenant will be with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you by this time next year." The line had been drawn. Ishmael was still loved, still heard, but he would not carry the covenant. And just as God said, the miracle came to pass. Sarah's once laughless womb stirred with life. The impossible became real, and on the day she gave birth, the tents of Abraham's camp overflowed with joy. They named him Isaac. He laughs. The boy who brought laughter back to Sarah's weary soul. But not everyone was laughing. Tension, like a quiet storm, began to build. Ishmael was now a teenager, and Hagar saw the shift in every glance, every whispered conversation. The household had changed. Isaac was now the center, the miracle child, the chosen one. And Ishmael? His presence became uncomfortable. His laughter too loud. His energy, once celebrated, now seen as disruptive. Then came the moment everything shattered. A feast was held to celebrate Isaac's weaning, a moment of joy and tradition. Abraham welcomed guests. Laughter echoed through the tents. And somewhere in the distance, Ishmael was playing, perhaps teasing, perhaps mocking. A momenta glance was all it took. Sarah's eyes narrowed, her jaw clenched. She saw Ishmaelend in him, a threat. She turned to Abraham, her words sharp and final. "Get rid of that slave woman and her son. That boy will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." A sword through the heart. Abraham was crushed. This was Ishmael, his son, his firstborn, the one he had raised for years, the one who had once filled the tent with hope. He looked at Hagar, at the boy who had grown tall beneath his watchful eye. Could he really send them away? But then, the voice of God came again. "Do not be distressed. Listen to Sarah. It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. But I will make the son of the slave woman into a nation also, because he is your offspring." So, early the next morning, Abraham rose, his steps heavy, his hands shaking. He took bread and a skin of water, and he gave them to Hagar. And then he let them go. No guards, no caravan, no protection. Just a mother and her child walking back into the wilderness. It felt like death. Hagar's feet burned against the sand. Ishmael, now older, tried to stay strong, but the sun was merciless. The desert offered no kindness. The water skin emptied faster than her hope. The silence of abandonment wrapped around them like a noose. When the last drop was gone and her son's legs gave out, she helped him beneath a bush. She stepped back, far enough not to hear his cries, far enough not to see his face. "I cannot watch the boy die," she whispered, and she wept. Her body shook with sobs. She had been cast out again, discarded again. She had trusted the voice in the desert once before. She had believed the promise. But where was God now? And then, a sound. Not her voice, not Ishmael's breath, but something deeper. Heaven was listening again. The angel of God called to her from heaven. "Hagar, what troubles you? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying where he lies. Lift him up, take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." And then her eyes were opened. There, hidden by despair, cloaked in dust, was a well, water, provision, life. She ran, filled the skin, rushed to her son. She cradled him in her arms as he drank. And in that moment, the desert that threatened to end them became their beginning. God was with the boy, and he grew. He grew not with silver spoons or servants. He grew with sand between his toes, a bow in his hand, and wind at his back. He became an archer, a man of the wilderness, a son of the desert. Hagar, still guided by the memory of El Roi, found him a wife from Egypt, her homeland, a woman who would walk beside her son and raise the next generation. Ishmael had 12 sonstribal leaders, rulers: Nabaioth, Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jeter, Naphish, Kedemah. From the banks of the Euphrates to the sands of Arabia, they spread out sons of the wilderness, born of the woman who was once just a servant. But what of Hagar? The Bible doesn't tell us how her life ended. No verse speaks of her final breath. No tomb is marked with her name. And yet, her story remains. Because her life was not defined by status. It was not defined by the cruelty of others. It was defined by one sacred truth. She was seen. She was heard. By a God who does not need titles to bestow blessing. By a God who walks the margins and finds the forgotten. By a God who hears the sobs of a woman under the desert sun and responds not with wrath but with water. Hagar's story is more than ancient history. It's a revelation. That God is not far from the abandoned. That heaven still listens to the rejected. That the wilderness is not a grave, but a canvas for divine promises. She is remembered not for her lack but for her faith. Not for her status but for her vision. For when no one else would say her name, she called God by his. El Roi, the God who sees me. And because of her, generations know that when you are cast aside, when you are left alone, when the road disappears into heat and dust, God still sees. If this story spoke to you, drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Bible stories. God sees you even when no one else does.